Yarana Tato. Hello to all of us. These are my stories this afternoon. I've got two stories. They're from the same valley, and they're both closely related to the same event. And I like these stories because they're an example of people who were kind of forced into difficult situations and who made really good choices that we look back on them, we just think of them as heroes. And these two stories come from a village, from a valley on the island of Hiwaoa called Puamau. And in December, I was in Puamau. It's a peaceful, tranquil valley, but it's got a violent history. But that seems to have all kind of passed. It's a nice place to visit. There are nice people there. In the 1860s, there were Peruvians who came to the Pacific with the intent to recruit labor to go work in Peru. But what happened was it was really easy for these things to turn into slave rates. And they stole people from islands. I mean, they went to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and they took away 80% of the people in a day at gunpoint. And those that they couldn't catch, they shot. So these Peruvians did some really terrible things. And there was a Peruvian ship that came to the valley of Puamau on the island of Hiwaoa in the Marquesas. That's in Polynesia. And this Peruvian ship came in 1864. And they stole 6 men. And probably what they did is they came into the bay and they told the people, hey, we've got some stuff to sell. Come out to the ship. We want strong young men. It's heavy. Come out to the ship and then we'll sell it to you. So these men went on board the ship, and then the Peruvians directed them to go down into the hold. And they went down in there, and the Peruvians locked the doors and sailed away. And one of the men who was stolen was the son of one of the chiefs of Puamau. And his father's name was Mato. And Mato, he made a promise to himself. He says, the next time a white man comes to this valley, I'm going to kidnap him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to cook him. I'm going to eat him. Because they stole my son. And about a year and a half later, an American whaling ship came to Puamau. And Mato went out to the ship. And he talked to the sailors, and he talked to the first mate, and he said he had a pig to sell to the first mate. And the sailors, they want fresh meat. And so the first mate, his name was Jonathan Whalen, he went with Mato up onto the land. Mato had a canoe, and they rowed ashore. And when they rowed ashore, they started walking up the valley. And Mato was carrying these ropes on his shoulder. And the American, Jonathan Whalen, he thought it was to tie up the pig when they caught it. And as they're going up the valley, there's men that come out on either side of them. And these are serious looking men. And this American guy, he got nervous at their appearance. And he turned to Mato to say, I want to go back to shore. And Mato reached out and pulled the hat off of the head of the American. And that was the signal. All those guys that came out of the bushes, they grabbed the American, they took off his clothes, they tied him up with those cords that Mato had been carrying. And then they started to torture him. They'd bend back his fingers, twist his ears, twist his nose. That's what they would do before they'd kill somebody. And some of the other people in Puamau, they heard about this. And they came to this place and they argued with Mato. This American guy is free, is not without sin. And Mato, because your son was stolen by a Peruvian white man, and this is an American white man. He's innocent. And Mato, he said, all the white people are bad. They stole my son. And in the course of things that afternoon, there was this one woman that came, and she was holding a baby. And she took her baby and she put it on the lap of the American guy. And they didn't kill him that afternoon. And in the evening, that woman, she came and she took away the American. She took him to her house. And he spent the night in her house. She was a chiefess. she was tapu, she was taboo, she was sacred. And so it was like her house was tapu. Mato and his men could not go into the house to like steal the American, because it would cause a war, because there were different tribes in the valley of Puamau, and she was the chiefess of one of the tribes, and it would create a war if he stole her, if he stole the American. But in the morning, Mato came with his men, and she had to give him the American. So they took the American, and their intention was to kill him, cook him, and eat him. And at that time, there were these two men who came. One of them was this Hawaiian missionary named James Kekela, and the other was this guy named Tahitona. And he was one of the other chiefs in the valley of Puamau. And they argued, they talked with Mato. What is it that you will give us? What do you want for the life of this white man? We will buy him from you. What is it that you want? And they talked about this and that, and finally they agreed to give a musket to Mato. And Tahitona, he gave the musket to Mato. And Mato, he released that white man to Kekela and to Tahitona. And they took him away to Kekela's house. And then, like a little while later, I guess they fed him breakfast. And they sent him out to his ship. And then after this was kind of famous, okay, at that time. Well, what was the thing with the woman and the baby? Okay? This woman was a chiefess. She was taboo. That's where that word taboo comes from. She was tapu. She was sacred. Her baby was sacred. When she put her baby in the white man's lap, she made him sacred. And so, like, if Mato and his guys had cut him up, his blood would have gotten on them, and it would have been like a pollution to them, and they would have died terrible deaths. So it was like, yeah, they weren't going to eat him, at least that afternoon. Another thing about that woman, she was a widow. Her baby was an orphan. Her husband was one of the 6 that were stolen by the Peruvians. So if anybody had a right, a claim to the life of that white man, it would have been her. But she came in her hour of need. She saved the life of a stranger. Kwahope te reko. Now this is the second story. That afternoon, after Mato had tied up the sailor, or the first mate, the sailors on the ship, they heard some crying up on the land, and there seemed to be some commotion or whatever, and they thought, oh my goodness, some troubles happened to our first mate. And so some of the sailors, they got a rowboat out, and they were going to row to shore to go investigate and rescue their guy if he was in trouble. And they're rowing ashore, and in the Bay of Puamau, as far as I can remember, there's some rocks near the shore. And they were rowing up to that place. And behind that rocks, there were a bunch of men from Puamau who had the intention to steal the boat from those American sailors. They were rowing into an ambush. And, the intention for these men was to steal the boat. But there's going to be a fight, and maybe some of these sailors are going to get killed. And they're rowing into an ambush. And there's this one young girl. She's about 17 years old, and she's connected with the household of James Kekela, the Hawaiian missionary. And she sees the danger that these sailors are rowing into. But she wants to warn them, but she doesn't speak English. And all she knew was to yell, "Pull away! Pull away!" Okay, in other words, go back to the ship. And they heard her call, and they went, oops, there's something going on here we don't understand. It's dangerous. And they rowed back to the ship. And in my opinion, not that I'm sure, but I think she put herself into some danger when she did that, because those guys hiding behind the rock probably heard her and going, what did you yell at them? And why are they rowing back? I think she put herself into a lot of danger. And she was probably so scared that the words got stuck in her throat. Pull away! Okay? Now that woman, as best as I can tell, her name was Mere. And she had a daughter named Repeta. And that daughter, Repeta, married a man named Vaiheiana from the island of Uapo. And she's got a ton of descendants living today. Like 30% of Uapo is descended from that woman now. Okay? Kwahope te ireko. The message that I get from this story is that when bad things happen to us, we can focus in on ourselves and like think of ourselves like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But we can, like these two, like the widow and this girl at Mere, they looked outside of themselves in their hour of tribulation to help others. Kwahope te ireko.